Hello everyone, welcome to Learnmate Academy's new series, Learn with me, Susan. So as part of this series, we're going to look in detail the various aspects of English grammar, and as part of our first video, we're going to look at the different sentence structures. So before we move on to the main subject, I would like to introduce you to the basic parts of a sentence. We have 5 different basic parts of a sentence, and to start off with, it is subject. And if you see, there are 4 sentences I've written on the board. Now let's look at what is the subject in each of this particular sentence. Now, before you identify a subject in a sentence, let me remind you what is the definition of a subject. Now, a subject can be anything. It can be a name, it can be a place, it can be a thing, or even an idea that we speak about. So in this first sentence that is seen on the board, the cat slept on the windowsill. So if I underline the subject in the first sentence, I would underline this, the cat. So the cat is the subject that is doing something. It is sleeping on the windowsill. Now moving on to the second sentence, John is reading a book. So we are talking about John who is reading a book. Moving on to the third, the flowers are blooming beautifully. So we are talking about the flowers that are blooming beautifully. Now moving on to the fourth one, my friend loves to play football. So the subject we are talking about here is my friend. So this is how you identify a subject in a sentence. Now the second important part of any sentence that you take is what we call as the predicate. So the predicate is a part of the sentence which usually contains a verb. So let me remind you again, what is a verb? A verb is actually a doing word. Now in the first sentence here, the cat slept on the windowsill. So previously I mentioned the cat is the subject, and the rest of the entire sentence would be a predicate because it has a verb which is slept. In the second sentence, John is the subject, and the rest of the sentence becomes a predicate because it has a verb. John is reading a book. So he is reading, he is doing something, he is reading a book. The third one, the flowers are blooming beautifully. The flowers is the subject, and we are talking about the flowers, we are talking about the subject. So this becomes the predicate. Moving on to the fourth one, my friend loves to play football. So we are talking about my friend, which is the subject, and this becomes the predicate because it has a verb, and we are also talking about the subject. So this is how subject and predicate works in a sentence in English. Now the third part of a sentence, which is very important, is the object. An object is something which is a noun or a pronoun that receives the action of a verb. Now let us look at each of the sentence and try to identify which is the object that comes. In the first sentence here, the cat slept on the windowsill. Slept is the verb, but the action of sleeping is not affecting the noun, which is the cat, directly. So when a verb does not directly affect a noun or a pronoun in a sentence directly, it means that in that sentence there is no object. So in this case, in the first sentence, there is no object that can be identified in this particular sentence. Now going on to the second sentence that we have here, John is reading a book. So my verb is reading, and can you identify what is the object here? So according to the definition of what is an object, the verb reading has a direct effect on the noun, which is the book. So since this receives the direct effect of the action of reading, this word becomes the object in this particular sentence. So the answer to this question of what is the object in the sentence is the book. So I repeat once again, in the first sentence, the action word which is slept is not affecting any noun in this particular sentence, and so it does not have any object. In the second sentence, reading is the verb which directly affects a noun. So this word, which is a noun, becomes the object. I hope you've understood. Now moving on to the third sentence, my verb in the sentence is blooming. So similarly, like the first sentence, the flowers are blooming beautifully. The action of blooming does not affect any of the noun that is there in the sentence. So my answer would be there is no object in this particular sentence. Now I'm sure since we are reaching to the fourth sentence, you will be able to know what is the answer for this sentence. Okay, so let me explain it once again. My friend loves to play football. So my verb in this sentence is loves. So since this word has a direct connection to the noun that we have here, it means that this part of the sentence, that is to play football, becomes the object of the sentence. So I hope this part is clear, and I'm sure you'll be able to get it quickly if you practice more. Now the fourth part of a sentence are the phrases. Now what are phrases? Phrases are simply a group of words which do not form a complete sentence. Now, shall we identify what are the phrases in these sentences? Okay, the cat slept on the windowsill. So when I just pick out this particular part, the second part, on the windowsill. So it is just a group of words which do not form a complete meaning. So moving on to the next one, John is reading a book. Now when I talk about a book, simply does not give out any meaning until and unless I join with a sentence in the front. Now coming on to the third one, the flowers are blooming beautifully. So blooming beautifully becomes a phrase which is just a group of words without any independent meaning. The last one, my friend loves to play football. To play football. So again, it becomes a group of words without an independent meaning unless it is joined with my friend. So this is how you identify phrases in English sentences. Now, the next and the final essential part of a sentence that you need to learn about are the clauses. Now, there are two types of clauses, independent clauses and dependent clauses. Now, independent clauses are clauses that have a subject and a predicate and it has a complete meaning. Whereas a dependent clause has just a subject and a verb and it cannot survive alone. So when we see in these four sentences, all the four have a subject and a predicate. So all these sentences are independent clauses. Now let's look at these four sentences. Just before I explain to you what is an independent clause, and I also showed you all the four examples where we had a particular subject and a predicate. Now coming to dependent clauses, it's very easy to identify them because it only has a subject and a verb. So we have a subject and a verb here. We have a subject and a verb here, and similarly in these two sentences. But when we analyze all these four sentences, we'll be able to understand that none of these sentences would give you a particular meaning. Now, the first sentence, when the sun sets. Now, there is a sense of incompleteness. What is going to happen when the sun sets? So, it has to be completed. So, since it has to be completed, I cannot put a full stop at the end of this particular clause. And this is why we give the name as dependent clauses. It has to depend on something else or the rest of the sentence for a complete meaning. Now the next sentence, if it rains. Now we do not know what would happen if it rains. So there is a sentence that needs to complete it. Going on to the third one, although he tried his best. Although he tried his best, he could not win the race. So when the second part of the sentence comes, it becomes a complete independent clause. Now it is just a dependent clause where it is not giving you any information about this particular sentence. Okay. Now the fourth one, which I found on the table. So here again we have a dependent clause. We are not sure about what we are talking of unless and until I add some more information to this particular set of words. Okay, so I do not use any punctuation mark. We do not use any full stops. Okay, because these are dependent clauses without any particular meaning. But it also contains a subject and a verb. So always make sure you be able to easily identify the dependent clauses and the independent clauses in any sentence of English.